Hello and welcome to my channel. A couple of years ago I made the model of the Phoenix Club from Phoenix Nights. It's a little bit rough and ready as it was my first time making anything like this. And then last year I released another video where I made some add-ons. Those were mainly from the Family Fun Day episode, where amongst other things I made the inflatable filth as well as Potter's Pink Paradise. Well, I'm back for round 3 and want to expand things further. I'm going to start off by including the road and the pavement at the front, as well as the car park for the vacant lot next door. So I measure and cut out the required pieces out of styrene. First thing first is to check that I've got the sizes right. As you can probably see, I've already added on the pavement out of a thin strip of styrene, and the next step is to carve in the pieces of the curb. I also have to bear in mind that 2 sections of the curb will be dropped. And using a metal tool, I push down and crush the styrene to create this effect. And hopefully you should be able to see it when I bring it in for a close-up. Details like this matter when you're trying to tell the scale. Also, this road is not in the best condition, so I used a variety of tools to create loads of marks and potholes, bearing in mind to try and make it look quite random. Also apply the same effect to the overflow car park. This is on a slightly raised elevation, so I need to sand down the ramp so I can join both halves together. I also made this fence to go across the back wall, and this matches the other side. So let's quickly dry fit everything and see how it looks. All the components fit nicely and should blend in quite well once painted. There should be a huge wall on the left hand side. I'm going to skip that out completely. We're now ready to prime everything and start painting. Since this whole area is basically tarmac, I basically got it all in black. Dabbing it on creates the speckles effect and gets rid of the brush strokes. I then go over it again with a lighter shade for colour variation. The curb is a lighter colour, so I paint that in a medium grey. Roads and pavements are constantly being dug up, so you always find fresh patches of tarmac on them. With that in mind, I add on a few patches. And while I'm using the black, I might as well paint on the trim. There are double yellow lines on this road, and to create that, I'm going to have to mask it off. This is a tricky process, but it should pay off in the end. Since these lines are always weather worn and damaged, I randomly dab on the yellow paint to create an uneven coverage. And once it's dry to the touch, the masking tape can be removed. And thankfully it requires very little touch up. To help complete that distressed look, I use a sponge to dab on some black paint, and this makes it look a little more natural. I applied a similar masking process for the speed trap. This was a bit more complicated to create, but however, I then dab on the white paint. I had a little bit of overspill, so I had some clean up to do, but without decals or proper stencil, this is still the best way to do it. And after some touch up, it looks as good as new. Right, so here are the new pieces glued onto the original base. I had to fill in a couple of small gaps and do a little bit of colour blending, but now it's time to install the street lamp. All I have to do is drill a little hole and slot it into place. This lamp is fitted with a tiny LED, so I can light it up if I choose. So I'll leave the wire tucked underneath just in case, and add a spot of super glue to keep it all in place. Here are my supplies for the parts of this build. This truck is going to be modified to fit in Jerry the Berry and the band. I have here some musicians and instruments. The next bag has a load of people sitting down. They should come in handy for Les Alanos. The streetlight came in this bag, so I have spares if I need them. This fairground trailer is a close match for one scene in the show, so it shouldn't take too much effort to achieve that. And lastly, I have Max and Paddy's camper van. The sleeping compartment above the driver's window is missing, so I need to replace that. And this piece of steering will be perfect for the job, but first it needs trimming down. I used a hobby knife for the initial cuts, followed by a file and a sanding sponge. This doesn't need to be perfect, as I will use copious amounts of filler to blend it all in. A gel-based superglue will ensure that it never falls off, as it works very well on styrene and plastics. You can probably see a few gaps, so we'll get those filled in, and once the putty is hardened, we can sand it smooth. And for that, I use fine grain sandpaper. Then that's followed by some primer. This is a PLA print, so you might need to remove some of the layer lines, because at this scale they become really obvious. For the base colour I spray it white, Then it's just a matter of painting it up to match the show. There are two different bands used in the show. There's the one which is actually seen in Phoenix Nights, and there's the one from the Max and Paddy show. And since that's the one with the most screen time, that's the design that I replicate. There isn't actually that much to paint, lights, bumpers, number plates and so forth. I painted the windows a black brown because they were all dark tinted, plus it also hides the fact that they're not transparent. To create the stripe that goes along the side and the back, I use masking tape. This is a fairly simple process and I do it in a couple of stages. Unfortunately, the layer lines on the print causes a bit of bleeding, which means I'm going to have to do some clean-up work. I've kept the design as simple as possible due to the scale, and then using some brown weathering powder, I dirtied the bottom part of the vehicle, and this helped to represent the dirt build-up for being on the road. Then after spraying everything with a clear coat, I cover the window with a gloss to help with that shine. And that's the motorhome complete. Next, we move on to the food truck, which has been converted into a games attraction, and we pretty much follow the same process with this as we did with the camper van. Now this isn't identical to the one in the show, but it is somewhat similar. So I paint it up so it's passable, and this also means not putting on the signs, as the one in the show is clearly beat up and has had many lives. So after a weathering pass, this is how it's looking. I didn't put any people on the inside, as that space is fairly dark anyway. And now for the entertainment truck. In the show this is all opened up, which means I'm going to have to remove this and create my own stage. It's just a matter of finding all the screws and taking it apart. And these vehicles, by the way, were not designed for customization, so I had to use brute force in places. To make the new rear of the truck, I was going to use styrene, so I measured it out and cut it to size. This is the roof, the front and the back section. There's a particular pattern on the underside of the roof, so I recreate that. It looks like some sort of support. And the rear of the truck is like a garage door, so I score in the indents and then create a trim around it. And since the flatbed truck isn't flat, I need to fill in all the indents, and then for the remaining gaps I use model filler. There are a couple of areas which stick out and I'm unable to cut off, but I'm hoping to hide those behind the musical instruments. And before I go any further, I'm going to paint the truck, which is basically just black and white. The repaint allowed me to cover up all the clown decals, because this is your basic commercial truck, and the only clown is the one driving it. As you can see, I've not painted everything, because some of this will be hidden. The flatbed is looking more authentic, now it's all in white. I've also built up and painted the roof, the front and the back. I'm not going to glue this into place just yet, as I still need access inside, of which I have a few things to make, including the speakers, microphone and keyboard. And I also need to pick out and paint the two musicians, Les and Alan. They're both wearing black suits with a white shirt, and at this scale we already know that the paint job isn't going to be the best. At this stage I had a few things painted, so I glued them into place, and this also meant the next time I sneezed I wouldn't have to go searching for tiny parts. Out of this pre-painted pack, the only thing I used was a drum kit. Next I need to make Jerry the berry, where Jerry the compare is wearing a large berry costume, so I mixed up some green stuff and roll it into a ball. And before it has a chance to fully cure, I cut down some styrene rods and used them as arms and legs, then used a little bit more green stuff to finish off the costume, as he's also wearing a berry hat. Since he's looking more like a giant pea, I've best paint him red. I also make a microphone stand out of a thin piece of styrene, and then glued everything in place. And that's the final piece made for this expansion. When I first made the club, I got my measurements a little bit off, so it's slightly smaller than 00. So just as long as I don't place the new item directly next to it, it shouldn't be too obvious. I also wired the lamppost up to a battery, and this was a nice little touch. So altogether, each new item helped to tell the bigger story. And by now, you should be hearing the quotes from several different episodes in your head. Maybe I'll revisit this again in the future and complete the fairground. So we'll see what the future brings. And remember, the future's bright, the future's Phoenix. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, if I can do it, so can you.